Nestled between the towering buildings of a bustling city, Harper's Bakery stood as a cozy escape from the rush of urban life. The scent of freshly baked bread, buttery croissants, and rich coffee filled the air, drawing in a steady stream of customers eager for their morning pick-me-up. The bakery had built a reputation not just for its mouth-watering pastries but also for the warm and inviting atmosphere that made every visitor feel at home. At the heart of this welcoming space was Olivia, a 25-year-old cashier whose cheerful demeanor had won the affection of both customers and coworkers alike. With her bright smile and genuine enthusiasm, she made sure that every person who walked through the doors felt valued. Whether it was remembering a regular's usual order or offering a kind word to a tired commuter, Olivia took pride in her ability to brighten someone's day. The morning rush was in full swing. The line stretched nearly to the entrance as hurried professionals, college students, and elderly locals waited to place their orders. Behind the counter, Olivia moved with practiced ease, swiftly ringing up orders, handing out change, and chatting with familiar faces. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. The usual black coffee and almond croissant?" she asked with a wink as she grabbed a fresh pastry from the display case. "You know me too well, Olivia," the older man chuckled, tipping his hat in appreciation. Nearby, a mother struggled to calm her restless toddler, who was reaching for a tray of colorful macarons. Olivia crouched slightly to meet the child's eyes. "Would you like a cookie instead?" she offered gently, holding up a small sugar cookie shaped like a bear. The child's face lit up, and the mother sighed in relief, thanking Olivia with a grateful smile. Every interaction, no matter how small, was a testament to Olivia's patience and kindness. She had worked at Harper's Bakery for years, and though the early morning shifts could be exhausting, she loved the sense of community that the bakery fostered. But as Olivia cheerfully greeted the next person in line, she had no idea that her unwavering patience and character were about to face a challenge unlike any she had ever encountered. The morning rush at Harper's Bakery continued in a steady rhythm, with customers chatting, the hum of the espresso machine filling the air, and the scent of freshly baked goods wrapping around everyone like a comforting embrace. Olivia had just finished serving an elderly woman her favorite blueberry scone when the next customer in line stepped forward. She was a middle-aged woman, impeccably dressed in a tailored designer coat, her manicured fingers clutching an expensive leather handbag. From her stiff posture and the way she scanned the bakery with a critical eye, it was clear she carried an air of entitlement. Ms. Langley, as Olivia would later learn her name, was not here just for a quick morning pastry. Smiling warmly, Olivia greeted her like she did every customer. "Good morning, how can I help you today?" Ms. Langley's response was anything but warm. Her lips curled slightly in distaste as she gave Olivia a once-over, her gaze sharp and assessing. With an audible sigh, she muttered just loud enough for Olivia to hear, "I'd rather be served by someone else." For the first time that morning, Olivia felt her smile falter. The bakery had its fair share of difficult customers, impatient businessmen, indecisive tourists, and even the occasional grumpy patron. But there was something about Ms. Langley's tone that carried an edge beyond simple impatience. Still, years of experience had taught Olivia how to handle rudeness with grace. "I'd be happy to take your order," she said, keeping her voice even and professional. Ms. Langley, however, was not interested in professionalism. She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "No offense," she said in a tone dripping with condescension, "but I don't want you handling my food. Is there someone else who can help me?" The words landed like a stone in the middle of the bakery. A hush fell over the immediate area as nearby customers picked up on the tension. Some paused mid-conversation, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Olivia could feel their eyes on her, waiting to see how she would react. Her heart sank, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had dealt with rude customers before, but this was different. Ms. Langley wasn't just complaining about slow service or a mistaken order. She was rejecting Olivia herself. Taking a steadying breath, Olivia met Ms. Langley's gaze head-on. "I'm the cashier today," she replied, her tone still composed but firmer this time. "If you'd like to place an order, I'm happy to assist you." Ms. Langley's expression twisted into a sneer. She leaned forward slightly, as if trying to intimidate Olivia. "I don't think you understand," she said, her voice low but pointed. "I want someone else. Get me the manager." The bakery, once filled with the comforting sounds of morning chatter, had now become oppressively silent. Even the barista behind the espresso machine had stopped mid-pour. Glancing toward the register, a few customers shifted uncomfortably, while others discreetly pulled out their phones, sensing that the situation was about to escalate. As the weight of the moment settled over her, Olivia knew that whatever happened next would be a defining moment, not just for her, but for everyone watching. The tension in Harper's Bakery was thick enough to cut with a knife. The usual morning bustle had been replaced by an unsettling silence as customers watched the exchange unfold between Olivia and Ms. Langley. Olivia stood her ground, her expression composed, but her heart pounded in her chest. She had dealt with difficult customers before, but this was different. This wasn't about a mistaken order or slow service, this was personal. Before Olivia could respond again, the door leading to the kitchen swung open, and Ethan, the bakery's owner and manager, stepped out, a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and a kind but firm presence. Ethan had spent over a decade building Harper's Bakery into a place that felt like home for both customers and staff. He prided himself on fostering a welcoming environment, and nothing disturbed him more than seeing one of his employees being treated unfairly. Wiping his hands on his flour-dusted apron, he approached the counter. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. Ms. Langley, who had moments ago been speaking in sharp, hushed tones, suddenly brightened, as if she had just found her savior. With a dramatic sigh of relief, she turned to Ethan and gestured toward Olivia as though presenting evidence of a great injustice. "Finally, someone in charge," she said, shaking her head. "I'd like someone else to serve me, preferably someone more appropriate." The words hung in the air. A murmur rippled through the crowd of onlookers. Some shifted uncomfortably, while others looked at Ms. Langley with thinly veiled disgust. Olivia tightened her grip on the counter, inhaling deeply to keep her composure. Ethan, to his credit, didn't react immediately. Instead, he studied Ms. Langley with an unreadable expression, his sharp eyes flickering between her and Olivia. After a long pause, he spoke. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but what exactly do you mean by more appropriate?" Ms. Langley's posture stiffened slightly, as if realizing she was being cornered. She hesitated, glancing around at the silent but attentive crowd. It was clear that she hadn't expected to be questioned, and certainly not so directly. She cleared her throat. "I just think it would be better if," she trailed off, searching for words that wouldn't make her sound as bad as she knew she did. Ethan remained still, waiting. His silence was more powerful than any demand he could have made. Finally, after an awkward pause, Ms. Langley leaned in slightly and whispered, as if trying to be discreet, "I don't want her touching my order." The hush in the bakery deepened. Olivia felt a knot tighten in her stomach, but she refused to let her expression change. She had suspected all along what Ms. Langley's true issue was, but hearing it said out loud still sent a chill through her. Ethan exhaled sharply through his nose, his expression unreadable. He glanced at Olivia, then back at Ms. Langley. When he spoke again, his voice was firm and deliberate. "Just so we're clear," he said, his eyes locked onto hers. "You don't want Olivia to take your order because of her race. Is that correct?" Ms. Langley's face flushed. She stiffened, her discomfort now impossible to hide. "I just think it would be better if—" "That's not what I asked," Ethan interrupted, his voice sharper now. "Let's not dance around it. Either you're refusing service from my employee for a valid reason, or you're discriminating against her. Which is it?" A few gasps echoed in the bakery. Someone near the coffee bar muttered, "Wow." Others simply stared, waiting for Ms. Langley's response. She looked around, clearly realizing she had lost control of the situation. What she had likely assumed would be a quiet dismissal of a cashier had turned into a public confrontation. And she was the one under scrutiny. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I don't have to explain myself," she muttered, avoiding eye contact. Ethan didn't waver. "No, you don't," he agreed, "but I do have to explain our policy. And our policy is that we don't tolerate discrimination of any kind in this establishment." The weight of his words settled over the bakery like a final verdict. Ms. Langley's jaw tightened, and for a moment, it seemed as if she might argue, but the silence around her was deafening. She was outnumbered, and she knew it. Nearby, a customer shifted their phone slightly, the red recording icon glowing faintly on the screen. The moment was being documented, and Ms. Langley was quickly realizing that she was on the wrong side of it. Olivia stayed quiet, standing tall beside Ethan, but inside, her heart pounded. She wasn't just facing a difficult customer, she was standing at a crossroads. One where dignity and principle would either be upheld or compromised. And from the way Ethan stood firm beside her, she knew which side they were on. The air inside Harper's Bakery had turned heavy, thick with unspoken judgment and the weight of an uncomfortable truth. Ms. Langley stood stiffly at the counter, her face pale but tinged with embarrassment as she struggled to maintain the superiority she had walked in with. Ethan's words had landed like a gavel striking in a courtroom. "Are you refusing service from Olivia because of her race?" The murmurs that had been floating through the bakery stopped entirely. The only sound now was the faint hum of the coffee machine and the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen. All eyes were on Ms. Langley, waiting to see how she would respond. Her lips parted slightly as if to protest, but no words came out. She seemed trapped between the truth she was unwilling to admit and the consequences of denying it. Olivia, standing tall beside Ethan, kept her expression calm, but she could feel the unspoken support from the people around her. After a long, awkward silence, Ms. Langley finally scoffed, trying to reclaim her composure. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, rolling her eyes. "I'm not racist. I just have personal preferences about who handles my food." Ethan didn't so much as blink. His expression remained unreadable, his stance unwavering. "Your preference," he said slowly, "is based on Olivia's race. That's not a preference, Ms. Langley. That's discrimination." A few customers shifted in their seats, nodding in agreement. One woman near the pastry display folded her arms, her lips pursed in disapproval. Ms. Langley huffed. "Oh, please, don't make this into some big political statement. I just want a different cashier. I have the right to be comfortable when I shop. Don't I?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. "You have the right to shop wherever you'd like, Ms. Langley, but you don't have the right to disrespect my staff. Olivia is one of the best employees we have, and she's more than capable of serving you. But if you refuse to be served by her for reasons that have nothing to do with her ability and everything to do with your prejudice, then, frankly, you are not welcome here." A hushed, "Wow," echoed from somewhere in the bakery. A man standing in line muttered under his breath, "Good for him." Ms. Langley's face turned a shade redder. She was used to getting her way, to people bending over backward to accommodate her. But this was different. She was being called out in front of an audience, and she could feel the judgment pressing in on her. "This is outrageous," she hissed, her voice rising slightly. "I'm a paying customer. I have the right to choose who serves me." Ethan, still calm, leaned forward slightly, his hands resting on the counter. "And I have the right to refuse service to anyone who mistreats my staff." The bakery had never felt so quiet. Olivia could hear the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, the slight rustle of someone shifting their coat, the faint clinking of a teaspoon against a ceramic mug. Ms. Langley glanced around, looking for support, but she found none. The customers around her weren't on her side. Instead, they were watching, waiting to see if she would back down or continue making a scene. She inhaled sharply, her eyes flashing with indignation. "You'll regret this," she spat. "I'll make sure everyone knows how unprofessional this place is." Defending her over a customer? Ridiculous. Ethan shrugged. "If standing up for my staff makes me unprofessional in your eyes, I'll take that as a compliment." Ms. Langley's mouth opened and closed, as if searching for a final retort. But before she could speak, a deep, steady voice interrupted her. "Excuse me," a man in a tailored suit said, stepping forward from the corner of the bakery. His tone was polite, but there was a quiet authority in his voice. "I'd like to say something." The room shifted its focus to him, and even Ms. Langley seemed momentarily thrown off. Olivia recognized him as one of their frequent customers, always polite, always composed. He adjusted the cuffs of his suit jacket before continuing. "I've been coming to Harper's Bakery for years," he said, glancing between Olivia and Ethan before turning to Ms. Langley. "And one of the reasons I keep coming back, aside from the excellent pastries, is the staff. Olivia, in particular, has always been professional, efficient, and welcoming. And to watch you treat her with such blatant disrespect?" He shook his head slightly. "Frankly, I find it disturbing." Ms. Langley's expression soured. "I have the right to my opinion." The man raised an eyebrow. Let me get this straight. You walked into a public business, demanded service, and then refused to be served by one of the most competent employees because of her race. That's not an opinion, ma'am, that's prejudice. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several people nodded. A young woman near the pastry case whispered, "Exactly." Ms. Langley's face burned with fury. But she had nowhere to turn. The weight of everyone's disapproval pressed down on her, and she was no longer the one in control. Ethan exhaled, his patience nearing its end. "Ms. Langley, you have two choices," he said plainly. "Either you apologize to Olivia and place your order, or you leave, but what you won't do is stand here and degrade my employee." The words landed like a final blow. Olivia could see it in Ms. Langley's face, the realization that she had lost. But instead of an apology, she straightened her shoulders, grabbed her designer handbag, and let out a bitter laugh. "I'm never coming back here again," she snapped. "And trust me, I'll make sure everyone knows how rude and unprofessional you all are." Ethan barely reacted. "Feel free," he said, shrugging. "But before you do, you should know that several people here have been recording this entire interaction." Ms. Langley froze. Her gaze darted wildly around the bakery. Olivia followed her eyes and saw at least 3 customers holding up their phones. Red recording icons glowing faintly on their screens. A middle-aged man near the coffee bar folded his arms. "You should probably go," he said bluntly. "I think you've embarrassed yourself enough." Another woman near the register added, "Yeah, this isn't the place for people like you." Ms. Langley's bravado wavered. She muttered something under her breath, turned sharply on her heel, and stormed toward the door. The moment she pushed it open, the small bell above it jingled, a stark contrast to the angry energy she left behind. For a beat, there was silence. Then, suddenly, a few customers started clapping. The applause grew louder. Olivia blinked in surprise. Heat rose to her cheeks as the sound filled the room. She hadn't expected anyone to react like this, let alone support her so openly. A woman stepped forward, smiling warmly. "You handled that beautifully." A young man in line gave Olivia a nod. "Seriously, you're amazing." For the first time since the confrontation started, Olivia felt the tightness in her chest ease. She turned to Ethan, who was watching her with quiet pride. "Take a break if you need one," he said gently. "You've more than earned it." Olivia inhaled deeply, then exhaled. She shook her head, a small but determined smile forming on her lips. "I think I'll stay." She wouldn't let someone like Ms. Langley make her feel small. Not today, not ever. Ms. Langley's face was now a deep shade of red, a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and frustration. Her hands clenched around the strap of her designer handbag as she struggled to maintain control of the situation. She wasn't used to being challenged like this, certainly not in public. And certainly not by people she expected to be on her side. "I have the right to be comfortable when I shop," she snapped, her voice rising in desperation. "Is that so unreasonable?" A few customers exchanged incredulous looks. The tension in the bakery had shifted. No longer was it just an uncomfortable situation between her and Olivia. Now, the entire room had turned against her. From near the counter, a middle-aged man wearing a navy blazer and sipping his coffee let out a short, humorless laugh. He shook his head before speaking up loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're the only one making everyone uncomfortable, lady." A ripple of agreement passed through the room. A woman near the pastry display folded her arms, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, if you don't like it, you can leave. No one's forcing you to stay." Ms. Langley's mouth tightened into a thin line. "I am a paying customer. I have every right to be here." From the back of the bakery, a younger woman, possibly a college student, leaned against the high-top table where she had been studying. "Not if you're going to treat people like this. You don't." She gestured toward Olivia. "She's just doing her job. You're the one causing a scene." Ms. Langley opened her mouth to retaliate. But before she could get a word out, another voice cut through the air. "Honestly, we don't need people like you here." The speaker was a woman in her 40s, holding the hand of a young girl who clutched a small teddy bear. The woman's face was tight with disapproval as she looked at Ms. Langley. "I bring my daughter here because this bakery feels like a safe, welcoming place. If I wanted her to grow up seeing people act like you, I'd take her somewhere else. But I'd rather stay and support people who actually treat others with kindness and respect." Ms. Langley's eyes darted around the room. For the first time, True unease flickered in them. She had expected quiet compliance, maybe even subtle agreement. Instead, she was being met with resistance from all sides. Olivia stood quietly behind the counter, taking everything in. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. But in this moment, she felt something powerful, something she hadn't anticipated. Support. Another customer. A man in his late 60s with silver hair and a well-worn leather jacket spoke up from his seat near the window. I've been coming here for years. And I can tell you this. People like Olivia make this place what it is. You? He chuckled dryly. You're the only problem here. A few people nodded in agreement. Ms. Langley let out a short, bitter laugh. You're all ganging up on me over something so small? A woman standing in line shook her head. No, we're standing up for what's right. At that moment, a younger man near the espresso bar raised his phone slightly, making it clear that he had been recording the entire exchange. I don't think this is going to go the way you think it will, he said with a smirk. People don't let this kind of behavior slide anymore. Ms. Langley's face drained of color. For the first time, she looked genuinely uncertain, her hands tightened around the strap of her bag, her shoulders rising in visible tension. She seemed to realize that she had lost control of the situation completely. Ethan, still standing firm beside Olivia, exhaled and crossed his arms. His voice was calm but unwavering. Ms. Langley, you've made it clear that you don't respect my staff. And I've made it clear that we don't tolerate discrimination in this bakery. So unless you'd like to place an order, respectfully, you need to leave. The entire bakery waited. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Ms. Langley swallowed hard, eyes darting between Olivia, Ethan, and the growing number of customers watching her, their expressions ranging from disappointment to quiet anger. Her bravado was slipping. She looked at the phone screens capturing her every move and seemed to realize that this wasn't just an argument anymore, it was something bigger. For a brief second, Olivia wondered if Ms. Langley would actually apologize, if she would take responsibility for her words. But then, just as quickly as the moment came, it passed. With a sharp, bitter glare, she adjusted her handbag, let out a frustrated huff, and turned on her heel. This place isn't even that good, she muttered under her breath as she stormed toward the door. As she pushed it open, the small bell jingled above her head, a strangely cheerful sound given the stormy energy she carried with her. And then, in her absence, something unexpected happened. Applause. It started as a few scattered claps but quickly grew, a wave of appreciation rolling through the bakery. Olivia blinked, caught completely off guard. She hadn't expected people to stand up for her, much less celebrate it. Her cheeks warmed as a few customers turned to her, offering encouraging smiles. You handled that with so much grace, a woman said as she stepped forward in line. Seriously, that was amazing, another customer added. Even Ethan, who rarely showed much emotion in situations like this, gave Olivia a small nod of approval. You did great, he murmured. Olivia let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For the first time since the incident started, she felt a sense of relief. And more than that, a sense of pride. Ms. Langley's face was still flushed as she gripped the strap of her handbag tightly. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to take her side. But all she found were disapproving stares, folded arms, and customers whispering among themselves. Just as it seemed like she was about to lash out again, a deep, measured voice cut through the tension. Excuse me. The room shifted as Mr. Carter, a well-dressed businessman in his late 40s, stepped forward from his seat near the corner window. He adjusted the cuffs of his navy blue suit jacket and set his coffee cup down with deliberate care before approaching the counter. His demeanor was calm, composed, but there was a quiet authority in the way he carried himself that immediately commanded attention. Even Ms. Langley hesitated. I've been sitting here for the last few minutes, watching this entire situation unfold, Mr. Carter said, his voice steady, and I have to say, I find it incredibly disappointing. Ms. Langley's eyes narrowed. Oh, great, another person here to lecture me. Mr. Carter ignored her. Instead, he turned his attention to Olivia. I come to this bakery often, he said, and every time, I've been greeted with kindness and professionalism by you. Specifically, you know my usual order. You always make sure I get the freshest pastry. And you do it all with a smile. Olivia swallowed, nodding slightly but staying silent. Mr. Carter turned back to Ms. Langley. So to see someone walk in here and treat her like she's anything less than outstanding? That's not just offensive. It's shameful. Ms. Langley scoffed. I have the right to ask for someone else. Mr. Carter tilted his head slightly. You're absolutely right. You do have the right to spend your money where you please. He let his words settle before adding, and this bakery has the right to refuse service to people who treat their employees with prejudice. A murmur of approval rippled through the bakery. Someone near the espresso machine whispered, "Exactly." Ms. Langley crossed her arms. I don't see why I'm the villain here. This is just my personal preference. Mr. Carter raised an eyebrow. Let's be honest about what this really is. He gestured to the customers around them. This isn't about a preference. This is about the fact that Olivia is standing here, more than capable of doing her job, and you don't want her serving you because of the color of her skin. Silence. Ms. Langley stiffened. Mr. Carter let out a quiet sigh before continuing. There was a time when people could get away with this kind of behavior. When someone could walk into a business, act the way you just did, and face no consequences. He took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough to make the moment feel personal. But that time is over. Ms. Langley shifted uncomfortably. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, but her pride wouldn't let her back down completely. Olivia, who had been standing quietly behind the counter, finally spoke. Her voice was steady, clear, and unshaken. I don't need to be defended, she said, meeting Ms. Langley's gaze directly. But I do expect to be treated with respect. The words, spoken with such quiet power, seemed to echo through the room. Ms. Langley blinked, caught off guard by Olivia's calm yet unwavering confidence. Mr. Carter nodded approvingly. Well said. From the back of the bakery, someone clapped once, then twice, before the sound grew into a wave of soft applause. Ms. Langley's lips pressed into a thin line. It was clear she had no real argument left, no allies in the room, and nowhere to go from here. The truth had been laid bare, and the only thing left for her to do was decide how she would leave. And everyone was watching to see if she would choose dignity or further disgrace. A thick silence settled over Harper's Bakery. All eyes were on Ms. Langley, waiting for her next move. She had come in expecting obedience, expecting quiet compliance, but instead, she had found resistance at every turn. No one had taken her side. No one had excused her behavior. And now, she had nowhere left to go. Her chest rose and fell quickly as she scanned the room, her frustration reaching its peak. With a sharp exhale, she scoffed and shook her head. This is absolutely outrageous, she spat. The customers watched as she clutched the strap of her designer handbag and straightened her shoulders, attempting to salvage what little dignity she had left. I am never coming back to this bakery again, she declared, her voice full of bitter pride. And trust me, I'll make sure everyone knows just how rude and unprofessional you all are. For a moment, the words just hung there, an empty threat. Desperate and weak, Ethan, standing firmly beside Olivia, didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, unfazed. Feel free, he said coolly, crossing his arms. Then, after a short pause, he added, but before you do, you might want to consider this. Several people here have been recording this entire exchange. Ms. Langley froze, her face drained of color as she turned her head sharply, her eyes darting across the bakery. It was only then that she noticed them, phones held up. Some openly, others just subtly tilted in her direction. A few customers, who had been quietly documenting the encounter, didn't bother hiding what they were doing now. One young man near the coffee station smirked, angling his phone slightly. Yeah, and I'm sure the internet will love seeing how unprofessional this place is, he remarked sarcastically. Ms. Langley's breath hitched. A flicker of panic crossed her face as she realized the full weight of the situation. This wasn't just a private argument anymore. This moment, her words, her behavior, was now in the hands of dozens of witnesses. And possibly, thousands of people beyond this bakery's walls. She had no power here. You should probably go, an older man near the pastry case said bluntly, breaking the tension. I think you've embarrassed yourself enough. Another woman added with a shrug. Unless you want to double down and make it worse for yourself? Ms. Langley's nostrils flared. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her handbag tighter. She looked once more at Olivia, who still stood behind the counter, calm, composed, completely unshaken. That was the final blow. Without another word, Ms. Langley spun on her heel and stormed toward the exit. She yanked the door open, and the little brass bell above it jingled, a bright, cheerful sound that contrasted sharply with the tension she left behind. And then, the moment she was gone, the bakery erupted into applause. The relief was almost tangible. Customers clapped, some even cheering softly. A few people turned toward Olivia, offering nods of approval and smiles of encouragement. "That was incredible," someone said from the line. "You handled that so well." Another woman added. A young mother holding her toddler grinned at Olivia. "You're amazing. I hope you know that." Olivia, who had remained strong throughout the entire encounter, suddenly felt the weight of it all lift off her shoulders. Her heart was still pounding. But now, it wasn't from stress, it was from something else. Pride. She had stood her ground. She hadn't let someone like Ms. Langley diminish her. And now, looking around at the people who had supported her, she knew she hadn't been alone in this moment. As the applause died down, Ethan turned to her with a small, proud smile. "You did great," he said quietly. "Take a break if you need to." Olivia inhaled deeply, exhaled, and then shook her head with a slight smile. "No," she said, straightening her apron. "I think I'll stay." She wasn't going to let one person's hate overshadow the kindness of so many others. Not today. Not ever. As the door swung shut behind Ms. Langley, the tension inside Harper's Bakery finally melted away. The warmth and chatter that had been momentarily silenced returned, filling the space once more with the comforting hum of morning life. The scent of fresh coffee and pastries lingered in the air, as if reminding everyone that this was a place of comfort and kindness, not hatred. Olivia exhaled slowly, allowing herself to take in the moment. One by one, customers stepped forward, eager to offer her words of encouragement. "You handled that beautifully," an older woman said with a nod of approval. "I don't think I would have stayed so calm." "Seriously, you were incredible," a man near the espresso machine added. "The way you stood your ground without lowering yourself to her level? That's real strength." Olivia felt warmth spread through her chest. She had always prided herself on treating customers with kindness, but she had never expected to be on the receiving end of such an outpouring of support. Then, from the front of the line, a small voice spoke up. "I think you're really brave." Olivia looked down to see a young girl, no older than 10, clutching a crumpled $5 bill in her tiny hands. Her wide eyes sparkled with admiration as she gazed up at Olivia. Something in Olivia's heart softened. She knelt slightly so she could meet the girl's gaze. "Thank you," she said gently. "That means a lot to me." The girl beamed and pointed toward the glass display case. "Can I have a chocolate chip cookie?" Olivia smiled and reached inside, carefully wrapping the cookie in wax paper. "This one's on the house," she said, handing it over. The little girl's face lit up, and her mother, standing nearby, offered Olivia a grateful look. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. As the bakery returned to its usual rhythm, Ethan approached the counter. He had been watching Olivia carefully, his expression unreadable. Now, as he stepped forward, his face softened with a small, proud smile. "Come with me for a second," he said, curious. Olivia wiped her hands on a towel and stepped out from behind the counter, following Ethan to a quieter corner of the bakery. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I just want you to know how much you mean to this place," he said, handing it to her. "Not just as an employee, but as a person. You make this bakery better." Olivia blinked in surprise as she opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and a spa gift card. She unfolded the note and read, "Olivia, thank you for being the heart of this bakery. Your strength and grace inspire us all. Take some time for yourself, you've earned it." For the first time that morning, Olivia felt her eyes well up. She looked up at Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't have to do this." Ethan smiled. "Yes, I did, because you deserve it." She swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. "Thank you," she said sincerely. Just then, the familiar chime of the bakery's doorbell rang again, signaling another customer. Olivia took a deep breath, composed herself, and smiled. "Back to work?" Ethan asked with a smirk. Olivia straightened her apron, her confidence fully restored. Of course. Later that evening, after a long but fulfilling day, Olivia finally sat down and scrolled through her phone. Her breath caught when she saw it. A video of the morning's encounter had been posted online, and it was already going viral. She clicked on the clip and watched as the footage showed Ms. Langley's outburst, Ethan's firm stance, and, most importantly, Olivia's calm and composed response. The caption read, "This cashier just showed the world how to stand up to hate with grace and dignity." As she scrolled through the comments, she saw thousands of strangers praising her. She handled that with so much class. This is how you stand up to discrimination, firm but respectful. I hope she knows how amazing she is. Olivia smiled to herself. She hadn't just endured discrimination. She had risen above it. She had shown the world that kindness and dignity always win. And that was a victory she would carry with her forever.